Hey everyone, welcome to episode 141 of Brew Talk with Mr.Beer. My name is Robert Lewis. I'll be your host once again for today's show. As always, we appreciate you guys taking time to watch our weekly videos. Hopefully you're enjoying them, learning something. If you want to reference our videos in a written form, you can find those on our blog page, mrbeer.com/blog, or just go to mrbeer.com, click on the blog button. You can filter by Brew Talk there. You can search your question in there, and then you can see what comes up. I got an interesting topic for you guys today. Today is how to brew a low-carb or low-calorie beer. We are well into the midst of the new year. Many people's New Year's resolution is to shed those pounds you packed on during the holiday season, which everyone tends to do. Some people will stick with the resolution, other people won't. But you may be thinking, well, to lose that weight, I need to cut back on my favorite beverage, which is beer. But you don't have to. Or you may think, I need to drink like craft low-carb or commercial low-calorie, low-carb beer, which doesn't taste super great, but you don't have to either. You can brew your own low-carb, low-calorie beer. So we're going to get in how to brew this. So the way to brew a low-carb or low-calorie beer is to use the power of enzymes. An enzyme is a substance that acts as a catalyst to bring about a specific biochemical reaction. So example of this is what your yeast does when brewing. It breaks down simple and complex sugars and converts those into ethanol, which creates alcohol in your beer. So that's kind of the power of enzymes. So depending on the different types and quantities of malt sugars your wort contains, your yeast generally produces enough of its own enzymes during the fermentation process to ferment and convert an acceptable amount of sugar into alcohol. Some of the more complex sugars, will not break down all the way, so that's what you'll leave some of that like body you get, some of that mouthfeel, and some of that foam stability from your beer. So the more complex your wort profile is, like with high ABV beers, the more sugars you got in there, it's going to leave a little more leftover sugars that aren't going to get broken down. That's where you're going to get all that body, that mouthfeel, where you get that kind of thickness of the beer, and it's also going to help with your head retention as well. So a large majority of sugars generally ferment into alcohol. So those more stubborn carbohydrates that the yeast cannot ferment, so those ones that are more complex that are left over at the end that create that body and mouthfeel, cannot, the yeast can't break those down using its own enzyme. So how can we help break those down to ferment that bad boy all the way out? So within beer, how you get carbs and calories, that comes from the amount of complex carbohydrates that are left over after the fermentation process. So whatever is left over from there is how you get how many calories or carbs is left in your beer. I mean, it's not, home brewing is tricky because it's hard to calculate exactly, but you can look at cans, there's calculators online, you can look up to figure it out how many calories, carbs your beer has based on the ingredients you're putting in there, how your yeast is fermenting, your original gravity, your final gravity. It can calculate all that for you if you're curious about such things. So what we want to do is figure out how we can help the yeast ferment out all those sugars, and the answer comes in the form of Beano. We've done an old recipe. We did an old video a while back when we launched these recipes, but Beano, like the stuff you get when you have an upset stomach, you buy it at any drugstore, grocery store, wherever. It contains the right spectrum of enzymes, where it helps break down those complex carbohydrates into simple sugars, simple carbohydrates that can be then converted into ethanol or alcohol. So this will help the yeast break down everything in your beer. So what we found by doing this is that if you have a beer that would normally finish at like 1.008 or 1.010, it's going to ferment at like 1.000. It's going to ferment basically down to what water is. Ferment all the way down there. So a few things to note about using Beano in your beer. It will leave a bit of a dry taste in your beer because it's fermenting out all those sugars. So it's going to dry it out a little more than normal beer. So if you're brewing like an American lager, like down with this bad boy, low carb, low calories, you drop a Beano in there during fermentation. It's going to ferment that thing all the way down. It's going to be a little more drier than it normally would. If you're taking gravity readings, like I said earlier, it's going to finish like 1.000, which is basically where water water measures at when you're calculating your when you're measuring things. So it helps ferment everything down. Like I said, it dries it out, breaks down all those complex sugars. So it's a great way to brew low carb, low calorie beer. We haven't tested kind of the threshold of this, of like how much alcohol you can put in there, how much it will ferment down. We have 3 recipes that we created a while ago. I think it was 2 years ago. They're on our website. Part of our workout series, we have a Pilsner, an IPA, and a Stout. So if you're curious about what this process is like, check out those recipes. If you got the ingredients, you can add some Beano in it. I think I can't remember if it's a tab or 2 off the top of my head. But yeah, it's a great way to brew a low-carb, low-calorie beer. That way you can keep enjoying your favorite beverages while you are getting super ripped at the gym for your New Year's resolution. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you guys got any questions about how Beano specifically works or what to use, email our customer service team. There's customer service at Mr.Beer.com, or you can just chat with us on the website. We can answer any of those questions for you. Zach and Ashley are very knowledgeable in these things. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like or a comment. We really appreciate that. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media platforms. We're at Mr.Beer on Facebook, Instagram, and the YouTube. Yeah, and if you want to learn more about Mr. Beer, join our Facebook group, Mr. Beer's Brewing Society. That's going to wrap it up for this week's video. Now we'll talk to you guys next week. Cheers.